Watagwan people, welcome again back to the channel. And of course, I'm your host, Mr. B. And if this is your first time, I'm gonna invite you to hit the like button if you do like the video. And if you haven't done so as yet, to just subscribe to the channel. So when we have dropped new material, you're among the first to know. Also, invite you to share your comments in the comment section and just hit the notification bell again, just so that when new material drop, it's yours. Now, today I want to take on an issue that we've been basically strafing us as Caribbean people for a little bit, right? And this is the whole development between the United States and its policy in the Southern Caribbean, certainly over the last couple of weeks. Now, it is easy for us to think that the Cold War of back in the late 1960s and 1970s is old history. But if we take a clean look at the developments, you will recognize that the fingerprints of those events back in the late 60s, 1970s are all over today's headlines, from the cocaine ravaged, the cocaine epidemics that ravaged our cities, to the naval armadas that are now streaming into the Southern Caribbean waters. Of course, what ties them together is a single brutal truth, and that is, when foreign policy is fought in secret, the costs generally show up later, and they often land hardest on the ordinary people. These are especially the people of the small Caribbean states. Now, let me start with the past. In the 1970s into the early 1980s, the United States of America ran a global proxy strategy across Latin America. And this was through covert funding, which initiated coups and armed partners to topple or weaken governments labeled anti-America. Now, when Congress cut off those funds for those shadow wars, the operatives found other revenue streams, including links to cocaine distribution, to keep the proxy forces alive. U.S. investigations have later showed up that the CIA knew of drug links and failed to stop them. Journalists reporting also exposed how drug money funded anti-communist networks and helped to fuel the cocaine and crack epidemic that broke out back in the United States of America during the period. Now, fast forward to today and watch how that history, what that history does when it repeats itself in the same pattern: secrecy, military priority, and private gain. Now, since September, the United States of America has carried out a campaign of strikes on vessels that it calls narcotic shipments, and has dramatically increased its naval and air presence in the Southern Caribbean. This includes the deployment very recently of the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford and its accompanying strike group of destroyers, literally boosting the armada of military vessels in the Southern Caribbean waters. Officials said that the goal of this quote-unquote armada massing in the Southern Caribbean is aimed at disrupting organized trafficking. Now, critics here in the United States will point out that carriers, destroyers, and Tomahawk-capable assets are a clear overkill for small drug boats, and that kind of programming fit the profile of a force designed for coercion, not interdiction. Now, in the course of these adventures, if you want to call them that, at least dozens of people have died in the strikes, the reported strikes on these boats. And more have been wounded or detained in flaming tensions between Venezuela, Colombia, and other regional neighbors. Now, regional leaders and experts are warning that the campaign risks miscalculation and could spill over into a larger conflict. Now, if this sounds familiar, it should, because decades ago, covert operations and shady funding streams created durable criminal networks that helped to build trafficking routes. Now, those same routes and networks later devastated Latin American governance and US cities. Now, we face a different but related problem, deploying overwhelming military force in the Caribbean with unclear legal cover and murky objectives. Now, these risks creating new forms of blowback for the islands caught in the middle. And in particular, these islands include Venezuela, Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, as granted we are a little further north. So what does this mean for these islands, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, the Leeward Islands, and others? It means that there is a massive, massive, massive security risk. Military operations close to these sovereign waters clearly increase the chance of incidents at sea, collisions, mistaken strikes, or special operation raids that could draw island states into diplomatic crises or force them to take security stances that most of them don't want. Caribbean militaries are small. A regional escalation could quickly overwhelm local capacity. And most significantly is the economic risks. The Caribbean economies run on tourism, shipping lanes, and services. News of military buildup and strikes deters visitors. Nobody wants to travel to a region that is looking like it is about to engage in war. And so even short disruptions, port slowdowns, flight calculations, or advisories translate into lost revenues for hotels, tour operators, and informal workers. It increases humanitarian and migration risks. And of course, it damages the economies of these Caribbean states. Now, if operations pressure the Venezuelan stability, expect more migrants and refugees heading towards Caribbean shores. Small islands lack the infrastructure to absorb sudden influxes without international support. And of course, there is a diplomatic entanglement. Some Dutch and British Caribbean territories host US facilities or treaties that complicate neutrality. Local governments may face internal political pressure to either allow US access to or to reject it. And either way, the costs of both sides carry the same negative costs. There's also law and legitimacy questions. International law experts are asking whether lethal strikes on vessels in international or regional waters without transparent evidence comply with existing norms. Whether legality is unclear, when legality is unclear, so is the political cover for allies who might be asked to assist. And so what we're seeing here is the building of a dangerous situation. And, if we are to be blunt, if past covert policies enabled crime to fund wars, present heavy-handed military tactics risk doing the same sort of long-term damage all over again. Only this time the damage is to tourism economies, fragile democracies, and the livelihoods of island peoples who were never part of the geopolitical chess game that is developing. So what should you, the viewer, take away from this? First, that this isn't, in my opinion, about drug busts or drug security. I think it is about power and whose interests are being protected. Second, Caribbean voices may be central to any policy that affects their seas and economies. And third, history teaches that short-term military fixes rarely solve structural problems. They usually create new ones. Now, if you care about the Caribbean, its people, its economy, its democracies, I think you all should push for transparency, multilateral responses, and respect for sovereignty. Demand that regional leaders be heard in any decisions that affect regional security and survival. Now, I am quite prepared to do a follow-up video on this one. Where I will basically map out the economic fallout to islands like Trinidad and Jamaica and the St. Lucia's, Grenada's, and the wider Caribbean if this naval posture continues. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you if you like the video to hit the like button. Feel free to share with your friends, and if you have not yet done so, subscribe to the channel so that when we put together material like this, I try to run this channel as an educational channel, not a sensational thing. I also try to shy away as much as possible from the general political side taking, because at the end of the day, we are only better off when we can get good, balanced information. So again, if you like the video, hit the like button, the notification bell, and if you have not yet done so, subscribe to the channel. So when we drop more of this kind of content, you'll be the first to hear. Peace. More time.